Sykes. And Charlie, I am psyched to see you today, my friend.
Do you like the new headphones? The other ones weren't working, so I don't know. I kind of like the look of the cans. What do you think?
I think it's what all the cool kids are wearing these days. Yeah,
Well,
totally.
or and
Rock and
cool
roll.
kid, cool kids and me. So I don't know where you want to start. Like, there's all kinds of very important things to talk about today. So could I start by talking about something that's not really all that super important? Like
Let's
we
do
could
it.
talk about we could talk about the weather, the dime, the
Yes.
new Trump dime. Okay,
Yes.
this is again, number 868, where I see something on social media and I think, is this real? Is this a parody? Is it really true that the Trump folks have put out a new dime that specifically does not have the olive branch, just has the arrows? Because of course we are not about peace at all anymore. I mean, Donald Trump must really, really be pissed that he did not get the Nobel Peace Prize, right? I mean, he's just taking the the olive branch out of off the
Mm,
dime.
yeah.
I mean, Matt,
It's on the
there's
nose, right?
it's a
It
bit,
is on the nose.
yeah,
And
nope,
in keeping with the Department of War,
yeah,
but not in keeping with, the Department of Peace or whatever, or the Peace
we don't.
President or the Institute of Peace or whatever he started. So, yeah, I guess he's decided not to give peace a chance. But did PJ O'Rourke had a book give war a chance? I think Donald Trump
Huh?
maybe read that actually.
Yeah, but PJ O'Rourke was actually kidding. It was funny. It was intelligent.
Yeah,
So
fair.
the other thing that I just want to at least mention at the top of this, because I think it's going to get lost. This story that Donald Trump is thinking of replacing the pillars in the White House, because the iconic pillars, because he is like this dog that needs to go around and piss on everything, right? He's got to Trumpify everything. So I don't know whether he's going to do it. I don't know who would stop him if he. What does he want? Like more Corinthian? He wants to make them gold. And you want to
He
make some
definitely
more like
has.
Caesar's Palace or something, like a casino? What?
Yes, yeah, he has a strong aesthetic. He really does. And I think this is, I don't know if you saw this. I wrote about this, but it was sort of over the holidays or something. And Chuck Todd was on with, I think it was Tim Miller or something months
Mhm.
ago. And he was talking about how David Axelrod told Chuck Todd at a certain point that Donald Trump had called up Barack Obama and said, I would like to plan these state dinners and redesign the way that you do it, like the aesthetics of it. And they wouldn't call, like they didn't call him back. But apparently this is really Trump's dream. And look, I think this is also part of the legacy building category, right? So I have a piece at the Hill that's about Trump has entered the legacy building phase where he is trying to, I think he's maybe come to terms with the fact that he's a lame duck. I hope he has.
Mhm.
And so he's trying to say, what gets you remembered? Well, it's like if you have like a big arch de triomphe, that's going to outlast you. That's going to outlive you. If you have the
To
ballroom,
pull it down, right?
you got the
To tear that one
ballroom,
down,
that's
yeah.
going to outlive you, right? If you've got your name on the Kennedy Center, and then so I think some of it's aesthetic, and then but I also think some of it is like going to war in Iran. If we could topple that regime, and if I can be the president that stops their nuclear ambitions, then I will have earned. I'm on Mount Rushmore then, right?
Maybe Daddy will love me. Maybe I
Yeah,
can deal with
that's
my dad. There's some else going on here. So where do you want to start off? Because I wrote a piece yesterday about Trump's war on dissent and war on the movies, I mean war on the media.
yeah.
I should have held it off for a day because he kind of escalated overnight, didn't he? I mean, uh,
I think this is well. You talked about the daddy issues.
yeah,
There's a thing. I do want. Let's go to the media, but I do want to
yeah,
say this about the daddy issues, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
Trump in Iran, probably going to. I think Iran's going to keep coming up no matter who
I
Charlie.
think so.
But
I have some thoughts. Yeah.
with the Iran thing, a week ago, Trump told Starmer, don't worry about helping out at all.
It's
We don't need
Britain.
your help anymore.
Britain's prime,
Right.
right?
He just told Britain, like,
Mm.
it would have been nice if you sent an aircraft carrier, but please don't at this point, because frankly, we've already won. And now Trump is basically begging our allies to come help open the Strait of Hormuz. And this really reminded me of, it's not original to say that Donald Trump is a child or that he's childish, but Charlie, it really reminded me of like when you're a little kid and let's say you knock over your blocks
Yeah.
in preschool or kindergarten and you tell the teacher, like, somebody else needs to pick these up for me. And then they come to you and they're like, Donnie, You are responsible for, you've knocked over these blocks. Now you have to pick them up. I don't think anyone ever told Donnie that
I
he
think
has
that,
to
see,
pick up
I
his
think
own
this is the
blocks.
kind of analysis that is better than most political punditry. I think this is more on the nose than all the,
Yeah.
deep thinking about geopolitical strategy. I think, but on this issue of, I actually find this issue of the allies absolutely fascinating. One of the things that I think Donald Trump is going to do is he's not only going to win the Iran war, he's going to win it about 7 or 8 times, right? Because we've obliterated them. No, we haven't obliterated them. Okay, no, this week we obliterated them. Tells the British Prime Minister, no, we've already won the war. This week it's like, okay, no, we haven't won the war. Tomorrow we will have won the war again, right? About 7 or 8 times. But
Well, this
it
is
is
how he
interesting.
gets to when he says he stopped 7 wars. This
Yeah,
is him.
you just
He's won 7 wars now.
part of me does think we should have given him the fucking Nobel Peace Prize. Who knows what? Okay, but the part about the allies, like, who knew that Donald Trump suddenly realized we have allies, and he's demanding that the allies, come, help him open the Strait of Hormuz, which apparently he didn't think anybody was going to do it. So, Trump spent much of the weekend urging key U.S. allies and competitors to join the struggle to reopen the strait as oil and commodity prices continue to spiral. The president sought to up the ante significantly last night with barely veiled threats aimed squarely at the NATO alliance, which he has done so much to cultivate, right? And he says, we're always there for NATO. We're helping them with Ukraine. It'd be interesting to see what they do. And then he puts out this thing overnight saying that, he's had talks with about 7 countries over sending warships. And he mentions China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. And Politico this morning goes, actually, the Japanese are saying we have no plans to send trips to the Gulf. Forget us. Britain, no, we're not going to send any ships either. We might send some mine-sweeping drones. France previously expressed interest, but wants the situation to stabilize first. South Korea, non-committal. Australia ruled out sending ships. And as for China, kind of hard to imagine Chinese ships actually working alongside American vessels in the Strait. So here you have the president on social media talking about all of my friends who are going to come to my aid, and they're going, um, who's this? Sorry,
Yeah. Well,
they'll
someone
recognize the
needs to
number.
say, pick up your own blocks. We're not helping you.
Mm.
And I actually think that's part of what happened in Iran. I think that Trump is very used to bullying people and having them learn how to kiss his ass or back down,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
even in North Korea, they learned how to placate him and kind of
Right.
keep him
But
happy. And I think
they still got their nukes, yeah.
yeah, and I think the Iranians though were like the kind of bully too that were like, we're not going to play that game. We're not going to placate him. We're not going to play the game. And like he is now continuing. He thinks that he's going to scare them, get them to back down, and they may just be like, no, we're going to see this all the way through. I mean,
They
the
just should
problem
have given him
is,
an airplane. They should have given him a goddamn airplane, right?
but they
Like
may be as
Cutter gave.
stubborn as he
They should
is.
have given him Air Force One. They should have given him some gold bauble or something. And think of all of the death and destruction raining from the sky. I don't mean to make light of all of this, but so
Yeah. Well, it's hard. I mean, we have to do our jobs as commentators and analysts and pundits and all that. And I mean, I do think that there's look, we're not the ones who went into a war without justification. We're not the ones who went into a war without clearly defined goals. We're not the ones who failed to build not only an international consensus, but a domestic consensus by selling this idea to the American people and getting a buy-in. We're not the ones who went in without an exit strategy.
no.
And
Or who
so,
ignored the warnings,
yeah.
you know? Yeah. We're
So,
not.
this is on him.
Well, it is, and there's actually a really interesting piece in the New York Times by David Sanger. But did Trump not see this coming? Like would the Iranians actually close the Straits of Hormuz? At a meeting in the Oval Office last week, a frustrated Trump pressed General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, why the U.S. could not immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The answer was straightforward. Even one Iranian soldier or militia member zipping across the narrow neck of the strait in a speedboat could fire a mobile missile right into a slow-moving supertanker or plant a limpet mine on its hull. Just one. This
Mhm.
is asymmetric warfare. So clearly Trump did not understand, didn't understand the risk going in, doesn't understand what it takes to open the straits right now. And you do wonder about this, the logic of war, which is a quasi-technical phrase where countries don't plan on doing something, but each step leads to the next step of
Yeah.
escalation. So we're dispatching Marines to the Mideast. I don't think that Donald Trump ever wanted to have boots on the ground, but at some point, if somebody says to him, "Well, the only way you can open the strait is by basically invading Iran and then occupying the entire
Mhm.
coastline,"
Yeah.
you might actually have boots on the ground. And so, like each day, it's like we're almost over. We've won it. We've accomplished everything. Then over the weekend, he's saying, "No, we're going to keep bombing them just for fun, Carg Island, and maybe we're going to have to send some." I mean, this is such a. I'm sorry. I believe the
Yeah.
technical term from Clausewitz is clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Um, that we're seeing here. But of
And
course,
again, it
stable
goes against
genius in charge.
everything and goes against everything Trump promised the American people and his political base. And I am surprised that he did this, but I think again the legacy building is part of the story. I think, and then also just what happened in Venezuela went pretty easy. Bombing Iran the first time went well, and so he became
He got
sort of
cocky.
an yeah, he did. He totally did. And then we've talked about this before, Charlie, but he's surrounded by yes men. Nobody wants to tell him, like, sir, that's going to be, you can't do that. You shouldn't do it. They're going to say, sir, we can do this, but let me tell you the possible ramifications. And I don't know, there was a quote. He was talking to Brian Kilmeade. I don't know if you saw this, Charlie.
I did.
There's so much out there, right? It's
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
to follow everything. But he was talking to Brian Kilmeade, and so I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, like, one of the admirals or the generals told me, uh,
sir.
yeah, sir,
Yeah.
this could go wrong. But then Trump says, but then I convince them by the time it's over. I've convinced them that it's totally possible. And I'm like, well, maybe they're just afraid to tell you the truth, or maybe you're not listening. And so you're only hearing what you want to hear. And man, that leads to stupid decisions.
Well, at least we can take comfort in the fact that we have a stable genius in charge. I'm obviously being sarcastic here. Did you saw the overnight crash out on social media? I see this is where I was
Yeah.
getting with the media.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did a piece yesterday. My newsletter yesterday was about his war on dissent. I mean, the way in which he's going after the press, attacking the press. But this is not a news story. However, war times tend to be the time when the government often will be the least respectful of First Amendment rights or of dissent. And then, of course, overnight, what happens? He escalates everything. He's talking to you about that reporters who are writing negative stories are guilty of treason.
Mm.
Calling for the death penalty for journalists who write things he does not like. I mean, can I just read some of this, or do you have
Please.
it in
Yeah.
front? I don't know. You
I
may have a
have it, but
better.
you can read.
Okay, Trump.
Yeah.
While most of you were sleeping or living your life or petting your dog or shoveling your walk or something, Donald Trump put out more than 1,600 words across multiple posts on Truth Social last night. Now, okay, Matt, you and I are both prolific writers, right? But I'm saying 1,600 words in one night, that's a lot. Okay, that's a
Luckily, he
lot
doesn't.
for me.
Luckily, he doesn't edit. So it's a
That
it's a,
that's
it's a
true.
first drafts tend to be longer.
So there's a lot of things going on. The hamsters are really moving fast on the wheel up here. That Supreme Court defeat over tariffs last month, gnawing away at the president. So he's attacking Chief Justice Roberts' court as completely inept and embarrassing. Said the court has unnecessarily ransacked the country. Then he attacked federal judge James Boasberg, a wacky, nasty, crooked, totally out of control judge. That'll work. Attacks Fed Chairman Jerome Powell. Talk about horrible, gross incompetence, total dishonesty, or both. Um, Fed's building contractors should be investigated. Media outlets reporting the war in the wrong way, quote, should be brought up on charges for treason, all in caps. Conservative critics of Fox News host Mark Levin are jealous and angry human beings. Blah, 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 blah. Goes on. ABC News, maybe the most corrupt news organization on the planet. One reporter was told she's a very obnoxious person. Another was accused of knowingly peddling Iranian myths. I mean, God, oh,
Well, if going
Matt.
after Mark Levin's bad, then Megyn Kelly's really in trouble. She said he has a micro penis. Did you see that?
That's great. This is really wonderful. Yeah.
It's really descending, yeah. No, maybe this is I thought the war was going to be really bad for Trump because affordability is even worse. Oil at $100 a barrel, gas is three something a gallon, and all this stuff has to be bad for Trump. But maybe actually it's good, right? If this is an emergency, that means
Oh,
you can suppress the opposition and uh,
well, that's
and
dangerous.
arrest. And I'm sure you saw Tucker Carlson now. I don't know if this is him getting publicity or if he is really picking up on something. But he has come out and said that I think it's the CIA is investigating him. And there were, all sorts of rumors and allegations. But one idea was that Trump may have fed him misinformation that he then went and told the Iranians.
Oh,
That apparently has been debunked, but who knows what will come out of this. I mean, Tucker
yeah.
has interviewed Iranians, and so yes, he has communicated with them. But now that we are in wartime, although we haven't declared war, maybe all of a sudden that becomes verboten.
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to take anything Tucker Carlson says too seriously. I mean, the fact that he has become. In my bingo card, I did not have Tucker Carlson becoming Alex Jones, but apparently that's his trajectory. But there's no question about it. Look, Donald Trump, is. I mean, look, they have been laying the groundwork for some time. That all dissent against the president is some form of treason. I mean, we get numb to this, but words have meaning. By the way, the theme of my newsletter, which is going to come out shortly, is words have consequences. When you say things like no quarter or that rules of engagement are stupid, when you say things like this, it has real world consequences. Um, these are not just incidents of verbal incontinence. They are reflected in policy. And so a country that basically exults in war crimes, when it commits a war crime or there's a terrible disaster like with the schools, that is not an accident. If basically you say, we don't give a shit anymore about these things. Now, I'm going a little bit far afield, but Donald Trump has laid the groundwork for attacking dissenters for some time. And keep in mind that he actually tried to arrest and indict six sitting members of Congress who told members of the military that they did not have to obey an illegal order.
Yep.
And he accused them of treason and suggested that they be hanged. Um, Imagine at a time of war how he is going to
Mm.
react to an independent press or other people criticizing
Yeah.
his handling of the war, like you and I are doing right now.
And this is something, as you noted, Charlie, he's been doing for a decade now. I mean, do you remember the
Mm.
Lubin Presse or whatever? The lying press was in the original German. It's
Oh
something that
God,
some of
yes.
Trump's supporters have called media. Uh, Donald Trump, just the whole fake news thing, weaponizing that against journalists and against the media. And then even folks like us, the kind of never Trump conservatives, he called us human scum. So there's an attempt
I have a
to,
pin. I have a human
yeah,
stone pin. Yeah.
there's an attempt to dehumanize. And once you dehumanize people, that sort of gives you a permission to do what you want. I'm sure you saw this thing. President Trump is reshaping the media. He put out this like
That he
infographic
put
where
this out. Yeah.
he is bragging about defunding, PBS, getting rid of like Terry Moran, John Dickerson, Chuck Todd, Jim Acosta, that
Acosta.
sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Joy.
And I
Joy. He's
think,
taking credit for Joy Reid too. So I mean,
yeah, and I think like not only is he sort of, confessing that he is engaging in sort of an authoritarian destruction of free speech and free press. I also think this is really, it goes to the legacy building. Like, this is a deliverable for Donald Trump. He's not going to pass any legislation. The Save America Act isn't going to pass. All he can do is
oh,
unilateral stuff. And so I think for his base, if he can convince them that he took down the mainstream media, and you probably saw the other day Pete Hegseth saying, like, I can't wait till CNN, is being run by
our buddy
or
Bielison's.
Larry
Yeah.
Ellison or whatever. Um, this is a deliverable for them. Like, this is when their voters are like, all I got was this lousy T-shirt. They can be like, no, we took down the mainstream media for
Okay.
you. That's a big
Yes.
deliverable.
Okay. Yes and no. Yes. Obviously, the animus toward the mainstream media is, longstanding. Actually, predates Donald Trump. But I don't think that destroying the First Amendment is a deliverable. I don't think that upending America's tradition of free speech is long-term deliverable. Yes, it is legacy building, but it's going to be a really enshittified legacy as people look back on that. I was shocked over the weekend that even Ron Johnson, who has become thoroughly deplorable, was asked about these threats from the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, that the predictably and reliably vile Brendan Carr threatening the licenses of news outlets that are not towing the party line. Even Ron Johnson said, "Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable. I don't know why where he used, but with the heavy hand of government suppressing speech." And of course, could we just point out that up until 5 minutes ago, the right was claiming that they were the defenders of free speech, that Elon Musk X was all about free speech. What bullshit that was. Um, so one of the big developments over the weekend was, and again, separate out just the rhetoric from what they're actually doing. The FCC chair is threatening to basically put news outlets off the air, use government power to take them off the air if they report things that the government
Mhm.
does not like. And I mean, this is one of those things where I think this runs up against a fundamental American tradition and belief. I agree with you, by the way, for the deliverable to the base, but I do think that there are some things that most Americans have in common, which is a belief that, yeah, the government shouldn't tell you to shut up. Now, again, in a
Mhm.
time of war, I think there is, unfortunately, a greater tolerance for suppression of speech, but there's going to be, there ought to be, and I think there will be a lot of pushback.
Yeah, and I would hope that the Joe Rogans of the world would
Yes.
finally come around. The stand-up comedians and the podcast bros who really put a premium on free speech and the ability to say whatever that you want. And I do think that someone like Rogan, we've seen as a Tim Dillon, the comedian and podcaster, who he seems to have turned against Trump pretty strongly. I haven't heard much out of Theo Von lately, but I think the Epstein files, the going after U.S. citizens with ICE,
Yeah.
specifically the two U.S. citizens they killed in Minneapolis, and now the Iran war. I think that, Trump's coalition is really splitting. The people who valued the sort of podcast bros are they're gone. I think that the interesting thing is like the Tucker Carlsons aren't gone. It's like, imagine this. I wrote a piece about this at Substack, Charlie. If I said to you, let's say that you're like a right winger, like a hardcore, like right wing
Mhm.
nut, and I said to you, like, yeah, I know that not going to war with Iran is kind of your big issue. But let's imagine that Donald Trump does it. Let's say that Bibi Netanyahu pushes Donald Trump into doing it, and Donald Trump goes into war. And would you still support him? And you're like, yeah, I still love Donald Trump. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
like, why isn't that a deal? That should really ought to be a deal breaker
Well, okay.
for
After the last 10 years, though, I think we've realized that, for some people, there are no deal breakers, or
Mm.
what is the phrase from the right stuff? They used to talk about when you screwed up with called screwing the pooch. And at one point, you realize,
Mhm.
there are some pooches that just can't be screwed. There are just some things that no matter how badly you screw up, nobody's going to recognize it. By the way, this reminds me of a conversation you had, and I've lost all track of time with everything because time is a flat circle. But we had an interesting discussion either last week or the week before about, that Trump could, extricate himself from this particular crisis. That
Mhm.
knowing Donald Trump, all he needed to do is drop a few bombs, declare victory, and stop it. And I think that you were inclined to think that, and I thought that was extremely plausible that he would
Mhm.
just, okay, all right, I basically, I need to get my dick out of this meat grinder really, really quickly before I go on to the next thing, which is to overthrow Cuba. And yet he hasn't done it. And it's interesting to me why he has not extricated himself, why he is continuing to do this quagmire, because there must be some voices telling him, cut your losses, it's going to get
Yeah.
worse. And yet we're hearing reports like that, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is in his ear. There are certain people, Benjamin
Telling him to
Netanyahu,
stay.
Netanyahu
Telling him to stay.
said,
Yeah.
keep bombing, keep bombing. And he's listening to them as opposed to, I'm guessing, even some of his political loyalists were tearing their hair out saying, this is a disaster. Casualties, prices, affordability. the spiraling nature of all of this, and yet he's not doing a Trump, right? He hasn't tacoed yet.
That's what I don't understand, Charlie,
Right. That's what I'm
is that
asking.
how is it that he's I would understand this if the Iraq War hadn't happened. If like, well, Vietnam happened, but that was 50
Right.
years ago, 60
Yeah.
years. We're way better.
Yeah.
Um, but we just lived through watching this happen, a Middle East war, the attempt to export democracy, nation building, all of that. And we saw what happened and the destruction and the consequences. And Donald Trump obviously witnessed it. He was very out. This is arguably the reason he won the election in 2016 is because of this.
Uh-huh.
So that's why I'm surprised. I would have understood if he went in there, he goes in there, he tries to knock out or basically set back their nuclear program another couple of years
Yeah.
and kills the Ayatollah.
Right. Which has been
And
done
like
now, right? I mean,
if he
mission
had done that,
accomplished, right?
but now, as we've already talked about, he is getting sucked into this. It is escalating, and eventually, now you have boots on the ground. But now, some of those boots, some of those guys might get killed. And so then, now, how do you leave now? Like, during the dignified transfer, Trump at least said that the parents told him, "Finish the job. You have to finish the job." So, like,
Right.
it is easy to get in,
Yeah.
very hard to get out.
Well,
I don't know, like how. I'm surprised that he's doing this. I swear I
okay.
am,
Okay.
Charlie.
Oh,
But he
okay.
he has to know because of Iraq. That's what surprises me.
Well, I never know what he has to know or what goes on inside his mind, but I do think this is a very, very interesting question. And there's another aspect of Trump, though, that I think is in collision with his normal reptilian instinct, which is to get out of a losing proposition. The other thing, and we've seen this now for the last decade, so this should not come as a surprise. Donald Trump does not like to ever admit he's wrong, right? No apology, no correction, no
Mhm.
back off. Never show that whole persona, we will rain death from the, skies and no quarter and no mercy. We are not going to back off in any way whatsoever. So Donald Trump never apologizes, never admits he's wrong, and hates looking weak. So you take those three things against
Mhm.
all of the rational and reasonable off ramps that he ought to take, and I think you get at least an explanation. So I think those are always going to be in tension. So again, tomorrow he could do exactly this. He could
Yeah.
say, mission accomplished, pull out. But these two things are pressing against one another.
But one thing I think we've learned is that his ability to spin and lie and manifest an alternate
Yeah.
reality and his shamelessness is so powerful that it sort of overcomes the fear of looking weak and losing. He
It
could,
has.
yeah. It always has, and so that's why it
Is he
doesn't
losing
even
it?
matter.
Losing it? It's I don't think that it plays as much. I think that after a certain point, the puppet show is great until you see all the wires, right? Well, I still, but I mean,
I
I do kind of feel like the wizard of the curtain's been pulled back a little bit, and
well
I just wonder whether
for
it's
those of us,
diminishing success, diminishing rate of
yeah.
return.
Well, I mean, for those of us paying attention,
Yeah.
it's implausible, right? Even if he pulled out today, we would say, okay, you've got a younger leader now, the Ayatollah's son, who's assuming he's survived, we don't know,
Yeah.
is younger and possibly more radical. You've got the IRGC in control, which is maybe worse than the mullahs. There's now nuclear stuff floating around. At least we used to know where it was, and maybe
Well,
it's
now
underground.
that's
That's dangerous. It could be floating around. Maybe it's more dangerous than it was. We still don't control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran could just keep it. We might leave, and they might just keep it closed, right, or just open it to China or something. So you and I could certainly poke holes into. He says he won, but we know the truth. But I still think, certainly for his base, if Donald Trump left today, like biggest victory ever, we totally decimated them. They're total losers.
yeah.
Everyone's people coming up thanking me. I think he could do it with his base that they would
With his
believe he
base, he
won.
could do
Yeah.
anything. Well, I mean, with his base, I mean, he could dance the Macarena naked on in the Oval Office, and they would think this was a great moment in presidential
Yeah. But what I'm saying is I
behavior.
think it
Well,
would
but by the
work
way,
as much as it always works.
okay, so and because the next chapter, I think we have to think a little bit he may not, but we need to think in a little chess match. What by the middle of the year, it's also possible that the big story is going to be the fall of the regime in Cuba. Again, not a terrible thing for the world, not a
Yeah.
terrible thing for the Cuban people, and much higher, much higher political return for Donald Trump. See, now this is again where I'm having a hard time sort of understanding the rational basis. When Donald Trump, I, I, I think Iran's going to be a loser no matter what, on so many different levels. Unless he completely gets out almost instantaneously. But overthrowing the government of Cuba, then it lines up, at least in his mind, like this is what American presidents have been talking about doing. Nobody accomplished it until I do. There is a large Cuban American population.
Yeah.
Cuba liberated will look like Cuba liberated. I actually think there might be, and there will be prosperity. And if you want to talk about legacy building, that may be it. Which is why it seems strange that Donald Trump is like, not going to the main event, right? That he is covering up what could be
Yeah.
an upside for him. And I'm
He
just
does
talking about,
that.
yeah, yeah,
He sometimes does that. He overshadows his successes, and so
yeah,
that would actually be not surprising. But you're right. Look, I mean, I think this goes to the legacy building, and maybe he got
yeah. That
too greedy with
well, he's
Iran, thinking that he could actually. It's so much harder. But look, I mean, he will rightly deserve credit if Cuba is free eventually, because that is a big deal, and that's something we've been trying to do since JFK. And if it happens on his watch, then
although regime,
that's a
okay,
check.
although regime change is still complicated. And these things never turn out exactly the way you want. And I think you're seeing that right now playing out in Iran, where people may have rolled their eyes about that whole thing about Greenland was really so stupid. Okay, except that Europe remembers when you were talking about that and has become more reluctant to support you. They saw what you did in Venezuela. This whole notion that the United States, as the world's I guess we're not the world's policeman because we're not enforcing laws, but the world's great bully can go into any country and snatch any leader or kill any leader. Um, the fact that is making us more isolated, America alone, we're actually seeing that play out in real
Yeah.
time. So somebody asked, "Will Cuba get another Batista?" We keep talking about, free Cuba. Are we sure that Cuba's going to be free? Do we have any idea? Or basically, is he going to install, some Jared Kushner crony, as his Codillo or his consigliere there? Will Cuba go from a, aging communist dictatorship to some sort of a kleptocracy? None of that is clear. So before we throw a parade for all of that, um, it is not likely that it is not guaranteed that Donald Trump will transition Cuba to freedom any more than he has Venezuela. By the way, what is
Yeah.
going on in Venezuela? I mean,
I talked to
have
a
they
friend of
become
mine.
democratic? Have they been
No.
liberated yet? I mean, what's going on there?
No, I just talked to a friend of mine who's Venezuelan, and he thinks it's better than Maduro, but not great, effectively. They've released some political prisoners, but not all of them.
Yeah.
There's definitely he's picking up, even from America, he's picking up more free speech, more free
Mhm.
political speech is being permitted, but it's not a utopia by any stretch.
Well, because at this point, if the government were to crack down and start killing, protesters or arresting people, that would be a, rather huge embarrassment. So and again, the world is just an incredibly chaotic place, and
Yeah.
it's getting more chaotic with every single day.
Let me
So
ask you
happy
about
birthday, America 250.
the politics here. Now, it
Yeah,
used to be, because we've got midterms coming up. Now, it used to be that the economics, people's perception of the economic situation got locked in around June. It's part of the reason why George H.W. Bush didn't get credit for a recovering economy
right.
in 1992.
This is an important
Um,
observation. There's always a lag. Yeah.
yeah, but I wonder, I suspect that that's not quite to the degree it used to be, just because we're inundated with maybe more information and more news, and maybe June, maybe things don't get locked in quite as much as they used to, like in June. That was what political scientists used to say, like
Yeah.
in the 90s. But still, there at a certain point, perceptions are going to, harden. And Donald Trump, promised to bring down prices. He did not do that. We are not in a recession. It seems like people, in terms of the jobs, nobody's really hiring, but nobody's really firing. There's kind of stasis
Yeah.
right now. So it seems to me that the Iran thing is another self own, sort of like the
Oh,
tariffs. And I wonder if this thing does drag on, is that going to, we already have a blue wave developing in the
yeah.
midterms. And I just wonder, is this what pushes the Senate over to the Democrats?
I think if you're a Republican, you have to ask exactly that question, and the anxiety, because Iran is not going to get better. The economic situation is really it's rather extraordinary. It took a while for the stock market to sort of catch up, but it has, and this is going to be a pivotal week for the stock market. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens. But look, GDP growth has stalled. Inflation has not gone away. It is not going away. I don't know about you. Before the ice storm hit, I had to go out and fill up the car with gas, and I was like, "Holy, that didn't
Yeah.
take long." You start to see $4 a gallon gas. So one of the things we're talking about, Donald Trump's ability to, to spin stuff. He's had a sense of optics. I'm just going to grudgingly give him that reptilian instinct. So if you're average American, you're sitting at home, come back from the grocery store, and you think, what the hell? You go to the gas station, what the hell? You're
Mhm.
looking at your 401k, you're feeling the anxiety. You feel a sense of chaos in manifesting itself in so many ways around you, that the country is not going well. And what are the optics that Donald Trump is emphasizing? Look at my gold drapes. Look at my giant
Yeah.
ballroom. Look at look at this big arch I'm building for you. Look at all of these things. And I wonder whether or not that there's going to be a cognitive break for some of these folks going, wait, is he actually even talking about people like me? Or does he
Yeah.
understand what my life is like at all? Or is he what those never Trump assholes has always been saying, this, spoiled rich toddler who's obsessed with getting himself golden toilets and golden guilds in the Oval Office.
Even just the Iran war, look, as someone who in the past has supported, under the right conditions,
Yeah.
military intervention, I know how hard it is, even when you button everything up and try to present it in the most ironic, positive framing. It's hard to get the public to support an intervention somewhere, even if you believe in the long run it's in our best interest in terms of freedom and security. If you do everything right, it's hard to get them to support it, because someone can always come along and say, well, what about nation building at home? What about the fact that the money you're spending in Iran actually could be used to expand the Affordable Care Act for all Americans? If we would just do, like, why aren't we doing that? It's very easy. I don't even want to say demagogue, because it happens to be true in this moment. But it's very easy to I think turn the American public, I think is much more focused, frankly, on affordability than they are a war that we
Well,
didn't know. We didn't even know we needed. I don't. No one made the case that we needed it, and so from a political standpoint, this seems like a loser, no matter how it actually turns
okay.
out on the
Well,
battlefield.
and I do think people do make those kinds of calculations. So, for example, is a political demagoguery? I heard somebody say this. I don't want to get it wrong, but the the amount of money we're spending every single day in Iran, the what $3 billion worth of munitions every day. That's like dropping multiple hospitals on
Mm,
Iran. That we
yeah,
could use that money here to do X, Y, or Z,
yeah,
and that case should not be hard to make politically. So right now congressional Republicans seem completely lined up behind the president on all of this. And I think, there's a lot of talk about the MAGA base splitting. Polls would suggest the MAGA base is still behind him. Republicans in Congress are still behind him. But if you're a Republican in Congress right now, you have just got to be, I mean, your stomach has got to be just roiling that
yeah.
knowing that you have to go out and you have to not just defend this, you have to cheerlead for this because Donald Trump will not tolerate any distance between you and him on this particular issue. So his tolerance for dissent is
Yeah.
zero, but his tolerance for dissent in the party has always been zero. And by the way, let's not just gloss over the fact that we only spent a couple of minutes on it. The president of the United States is out making public statements saying that reporters should be arrested and charged with treason for reporting things about this war. I'm trying to think the darkest moments for the First
Mm.
Amendment in American history, and there have been many in
Yeah.
wartime. I'm not sure that outside of say Woodrow Wilson in World War I, that any president has said this sort of thing. I'm not even sure that Woodrow Wilson said it out loud. So it is
I mean,
it
is it
is a
like
dangerous moment.
Alien and Sedition Act or something? You got to go
But
back a
actually, go
ways
back,
for that.
yeah, like 1798.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There are Senator Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia are
yeah.
sounding the alarm. Cramer said he's glad he's not on the ballot. So maybe this is one way. When we start looking for solutions, it's hard. I don't know what happens when they take the first of us away. When like when Jim Acosta is led away in handcuffs or something, then things change. Or even if Tucker Carlson, we'll see what happens there. If they really go after him. But until that time, it seems like our best recourse is really at the ballot box. And um and it does seem like that wave is building. And if that's our best way to speak, I think, Charlie. I mean,
Mm,
should we take to the streets, in a peaceful way? Should there be no kings right now? What do you think?
yeah, yes, there should be, and it needs to be peaceful. No, look, I agree with you. Like, what is actually going to change? It will be the ballot box, but it's not just the ballot box. If we are talking about the First Amendment and free speech, then one of the best things we can do is what we are doing right now.
Yeah.
You and I, right now, we are engaging in free speech. We are not cowering before this. We are not being intimidated. We are not being bullied. And we need that from all of those institutions that have sheltered under the First Amendment for decades. And I'm talking about you, Barry Weiss and CBS. I'm talking about CNN. I'm talking about ABC, NBC. It is
Yeah.
more important than ever for people to say, okay, this is why it is valuable, and I am going to stand up. So if you're going to throw me in jail because then we're going to have a fight that I think we will win in terms of the Constitution. Is it dangerous? Yes, it's extremely dangerous, but that's why you fight. You don't just simply say, well, there's nothing that we can do, right? That he's going to destroy us. So this is where it requires courage, and this is what makes it so frustrating watching the corporatization of the media,
Yeah.
which has been pounding itself on the back for so many years, and yet they are going along with him, and Donald Trump thinks they are. And by the way, fuck the White House Correspondents' Dinner for still having Donald
Mhm.
Trump. Are they
Yeah.
still going to have him as their guest of honor? The White
Yep.
House Correspondents Association at their fucking dinner. I'm sorry to say it
Yep.
again. After he is out there, let me just look over here, calling for treason charges against journalists for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Yep.
This would be a
It's
great moment
insane.
for them to say, I'm
Insane.
sorry, you know what? That crosses a line. We are not going to sit, and get all dressed up in our
Yeah.
fucking tuxedos and sit with you and pretend that everything is freaking normal.
That's the
No,
thing. There are people who want to pretend everything is normal. They want to
right.
go along with tradition and the way things have always
Yeah.
been. It's like, no, we have an existential threat right now. And it never even occurred to me, Charlie, and I know it never even occurred to you that we would stop doing what we're doing. Like we're just gonna,
No.
we will keep doing what we're doing. And to your point about people, especially in the corporate media, which you and I are not in, the corporate media to be tough. I mean, I remember when Jimmy Kimmel showed Spine. That
Uh,
really
Big. Yes.
that was a huge moment. It inspired other people to have courage. It showed that you can confront them and when you could stare them down and then, you never know what's going to happen when you show spine. Like Stephen Colbert,
Mm-hmm.
by doing what he did and having, James Tallarico on the show, albeit not on the broadcast show, but on that YouTube channel. I think that could be the thing that delivers the U.S. Senate to Democrats this year, it's very possible that Stephen Colbert will ultimately will look back and he will have been
That's not crazy.
the X factor. And so, if you're out there watching, I would encourage you to support people who are doing. It doesn't have to be us. It can be. It doesn't
Okay.
have to be. But
Right.
support, like that's something you can do. If you are a content creator, keep creating. Don't back down. If you are someone who's supporting content creators, please keep doing it. Because you're right, Charlie. That is one big thing we have. To me, I didn't even think of it because the thought of backing down doesn't occur, but it is important to say because we have seen examples where these law firms back down, these universities back down, and if we start seeing that happen, well, we did see it happen with like the Washington Post because of their owner.
Yeah.
So it does bear repeating. It's
Okay.
not
So
it doesn't go without saying.
I'm going to underline something you said. And you're right. It never crosses my mind that I'm gonna never back off because what we know, this is what we do. This is who we are. But I did draw particular inspiration from Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, and this is not
Yes.
this is not a trivial point. When because I remember sitting in bed with I mean we were like watching television, watching actually on YouTube, watching the Jimmy Kimmel monologue after he had been we thought fired, he'd been suspended,
Yeah.
he comes back. Okay, you go through a near death experience. So the question is, how do you respond? You've known people who've gone through these things. Some of them come back shell shocked.
Hmm.
That's like, okay, I never want to go through that again. I'm going to be careful. I'm going to be looking out for my back. I'm always going to be looking over my shoulder. And then you have people like Jimmy Kimmel who say basically, F it. And every single night when he comes out and it's like he is not holding back anything.
Yeah.
And you know that he knows the danger. He knows the risk. He knows what it's like to actually experience, and yet he's
Hmm.
still doing. And I have to say, I find that remarkably
Yeah.
empowering and encouraging. That because every day I'll think, so did he sit down with the ABC executives and the Disney executives and say, okay, but I won't go there. Okay, well, just be careful, Jimmy, that you don't make him too mad. You can tell there is no filter there whatsoever. And every single night he's going to go, you know what? You're going to come for me
Yeah.
because I am not backing off in any way whatsoever. And I got to say that as exhausting as this is for you and I, seeing something like that
Yeah. No,
is
it's
inspiring. It really is.
if we watch and we see someone who is famous and successful and they are brought to heel, we start to
Hmm.
think like, well, how could how can I stand up if even CBS, right?
Yeah,
Whatever, CNN with all of their lawyers and all of their smart, how can I do it? But if you see someone, as Churchill said, there's nothing more exhilarating than having been shot at with no effect. And there's something to it when courage is
great quote.
contagious. Courage is contagious, so is cowardice. And so when these examples of courage, like the Jimmy Kimmel example, is inspiring. And Charlie, there's an interesting I can't remember which book I was reading, but when we started bombing Iran, and people were talking about how, you can't win a war typically, like unless you drop an atomic bomb like we did on Japan, you can't
Hmm.
actually get people to surrender by air power.
Right,
We and I was
right.
reading a book, and they were talking about how during the Blitz, when Germany was bombing London, and what happened is in London, it actually backfired. Like not only did the public not surrender, but they actually became more
Great
united,
analogy. Right.
and there were people who were like, who were severely depressed or in mental institutions who left the institutions and started driving ambulances and helping
Hmm.
people. Depression went away. Like
They
all
have
sorts of
purpose. Right.
exactly all sorts of societal ills went away, and the public pulled together. And one of the things they found was this: that when a bomb went off, there were a few types of people. Like one type got killed, and
Right.
so, in a sense, they didn't count anymore in terms of their resilience.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people who narrowly escaped unscathed.
Right.
And what they found is that if you escaped unscathed, you actually became, you started to have this almost, how Donald Trump having come close to the assassination attempt, thought that God had granted him this second chance, and in a way, he became more emboldened. That people who survived these close call bombings actually became more resilient
Right.
and more insurgent, and so I think that there is something to that in terms of those of us who
I
maybe
think
come
so.
under attack and don't give in. And I've talked way too long now, Charlie. I
No,
apologize
no,
for
no,
that
no, no.
rant.
I love no. This was really good because I think this
Mm.
resilience is important, but it's also a choice. And various times, in your life, you're threatened with a lawsuit, and I've been threatened with lawsuits or other things that are going on, and you start thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, or maybe I shouldn't say that, or and then but let me tell you, a fundamental choice that to the extent that there is that voice in the head saying, don't say this, don't say that, then you know, what is the point of what you're doing? You
Yeah,
know, what are you talking about? Why are you even doing any of this? So you have to basically decide that voice needs to be shut off. You need to say, okay, I am not going to listen to the people telling me what I cannot do, what I cannot say. And I think this is what's really important. I think that, I'm sorry to
yeah.
keep coming back to Jimmy Kimmel because I know I sound like a fanboy, but I can tell that he does this. And he was, by the way, at the Oscars last night, which I did not watch. But, you know, he also had something where he said, it is exhausting every night to have to talk about Donald Trump, but this is what we have to do, right? And
This is the
uh,
business we have chosen.
this is the business we have
Yeah.
chosen. This is the fight. We did not necessarily choose it, but
Mm-mm.
this has been
Nope.
thrust upon us. And, you know, people never know, how you're going to react at a time of a crisis. You wonder, how would I have reacted during this particular period of history? Well, you know what?
Yeah,
Now you're going to find out because this is our moment of history, right? You know, how
it
would I
is.
have reacted if
It
I had been living
is.
in 1930s Germany or if I had been living in 1930? Well,
Yeah,
you know what? Now. You know exactly how you'd react
yeah.
now.
Charlie, you're speaking my language here. I mean, like, as someone who grew up a young conservative, this is not what I signed up for, right? I didn't get
No,
involved
not at
in
all.
politics. I've now spent maybe half of my professional career opposing a Republican, president. This is not what
Right.
I envisioned or dreamed of. It's certainly not what my
Yeah.
family thought I would do. But you know, there are moments that they're defining moments in history and in time when, and I don't know why you would become a pundit or a commentator or a writer if you weren't going to tell the truth as you saw it. I could see if
When
I
you're a
was an
hack, you're a
insurance,
hack. No, no, no.
yeah,
There are hacks out there, and they make a good
well,
living,
no,
and
but I'm
no
saying
one will
like,
remember anything they ever done
yeah,
at all.
but if
And it's like,
I would have done
fuck
a
them.
different
But
job,
yeah, yeah,
be like an insurance salesman or even a political, an
yeah,
RNC guy. But like, if you're gonna ostensibly, why would you do this if you couldn't? But I
yeah.
had lunch with a friend of mine the other day, um, and uh, so I'll call him out. His name is Jeff Mayhew, and he is in charge of this group that their goal is to uncap the House. So right now there's
Okay, right.
435 members of the House. There probably should be a couple thousand actually.
Yeah,
But there's only
right.
435, and he is really. I'm a big believer in his cause. I
Yeah,
think it would solve a ton of problems, right? And had lunch with him. I have another friend named Lisa Britton, and her mission in life, and it's one that I believe in too, is to sort of stop this war on men and this war on boys. Where at a certain point we started talking about you need to man up. And I think that even though there is toxic masculinity, clearly look no further than our Secretary of War to find it. Um, I think that as the father of two boys, this is an issue that I care passionately about, and I think fixing it would resolve some of the incel problem and some of the MAGA
yeah, right.
problem. And so the reason I'm talking about all this is like these are both people who have causes which I think are very important and which I support. I'm also in the past, as you have been part, of like the pro-life movement, even though I believe in, exceptions and things like that. And um, there's a lot. My point is that there's a lot of really important movements that I would love to have a world where we could focus on them. But what I told my friend Jeff over lunch is like, I'm glad that you have really taken on this issue and I support it.
Hmm.
But my goal is getting rid of Donald Trump. Like, I view Donald Trump as the existential threat facing liberal democracy. And so my goal primarily, and I'm not an activist, I'm a columnist and a writer, but to me, like the big mission, the big defining test of my life is to see him gone. And then I would be more than happy to like really focus on these other issues, which are very warranted and very important as well.
Well, I've been thinking that for every year for the last 10 years. You know, as soon as we get past this has got to end.
Yeah.
I'm going to get back to writing about this, or I want to talk about this particular issue. I'm interested in education. I'm interested in culture, and yet this is the one that is right before us, It's like there are certain moments in history where history tells you what you need to be interested in. History tells you what you have to be caring about. This is one of them, isn't it?
There's an Oliver Wendell Holmes quote, and I will butcher it, but he said something to the effect of, it is very important to be involved in the issue of your time and the dominant
Yeah.
issues and figures of your time. Otherwise, you will have been judged not to have lived.
Mm.
And so there are never, or I'm sorry, they call themselves anti-Trump people. They're
Mhm.
just trying to pretend that he doesn't exist. So they're writing today about, how the Oscars last night were too political, or what, like they've spent the last decade trying to write about politics without spending too much time focused on the by far dominant figure of our
Yeah.
era, like
So,
him
so
or
do you,
not.
did, yeah. So have you seen the picture that won the best picture?
One battle
One fight
after
after another.
another.
What
Yep.
is it good? You
Yep.
recommend it?
It's good.
Okay.
I do recommend it. I do
I
recommend
have
it.
it.
Absolutely.
I have it on. I have it on my
Yeah.
list.
It's not Casablanca. It's not, it will not go down in history in the pantheon of great films of all time, but it is a good movie, and I think you will
Mm.
find it somewhat inspiring, because it's
Which
certainly
is it?
relevant. These are you know basically, uh, well, I guess you could call them domestic terrorists. Certainly, Christine Ohm would, but they are also fighting against fascism. So I think it speaks to our moment in time, certainly. And there's humor
Yeah.
there with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Danielle is saying it's a terrible film. She hated it. Just so you know, just in the comments, Danielle hated it. Okay,
Wow.
can I give you a movie recommendation?
I thought Sinners was overrated, by the way.
I
So
have
that's
not,
just
and
me.
that's actually not on my list.
It's a
Okay,
glorified zombie movie.
I um I made a movie recommendation. I think it was on the podcast I did last week with Molly John Fast, which I really want to pass on to you and to our listeners as well. It's a Swedish movie. It is in Swedish. I always recommend watching these things with subtitles, not dubbed in. It is a brilliant movie called The Swedish Connection. It's a World
Hmm.
War II movie. It's kind of a Swedish version of Schindler's List, and it's about ordinary people who do extraordinary things. It's based on a true story, and it is genuinely inspiring. It deals with the question of like, what do you do when you realize that you are Sweden and you are a neutral country? You have to do what Hitler says basically, but then you begin to realize what Hitler is doing with the Jews during the Holocaust, and people have to make moral decisions. And then the question is, what can they do? And the fact that it's about sort of the nobodies again, it's kind of a Swedish version of Schindler's List. It's got a certain wry humor to it, believe it or not, even though it's a deadly serious subject. But I strongly recommend, if people are looking for a movie to inspire you that answers the question, "What can I do?" This is the one. I'm just telling you right now. The Scandinavians
Yeah.
make great World War II movies,
Well,
much better than the Americans do.
you haven't misled me. Judgment at Nuremberg, which you recommended,
Right?
was fabulous. My son and I watched that a few months ago. So I have to check this one out, Charlie.
Have you seen Quisling?
I have not.
Norwegian movie
Mhm.
about Quisling, who was the basically the Nazi
He was a
puppet
Quisling.
In Norway. Right. He's so hated in Norway that they actually, I mean, it's a word. They did a movie about it, and again, it's a post movie. So I just would strongly recommend that one as well. It is Norwegian. It is better than anything I've seen.
Yeah, as a dad, one of the things I do, and we obviously have to be somewhat careful. My kids,
Yeah.
they're of an age now where I can expose them to a lot of stuff, but still a little bit careful. But I find it a very good way to educate them in uh, understanding any ideas and worldview. And so I think if done responsibly, like watching these movies can really be a way of not only inspiring but like teaching people about ideas and liberal democracy and values, morals, all that. It can be a good
Have,
teaching tool. It doesn't
have,
have to be, you know, cheap MTV stuff.
did I ever tell you about my worst moment of parenting, though?
No,
Absolutely, my worst moment. I'm trying to remember the movie now. Was when my kids were like maybe 10 or 11 years old. Um, we watched, what was it? Was the South Park movie like Team USA or something like that? What was,
that
you
was the
know?
same creators, but
Right.
it's not. Yeah, I
What was it? What was the name of the movie? It was like,
think it is Team USA.
okay, okay. And because, but my famous last words were, "It's puppets. How bad could it be?" And I had,
Yeah.
and I have to say that I can still remember sitting on the couch going, "This is the worst choice I have ever made as a parent to show this movie." So
Mm,
if anybody ever says it's just puppets, how bad can it be? Be
it could be
skeptical,
bad.
Matt.
It could
All
be
right,
bad.
Matt.
All right.
On that
Always a
note,
pleasure.
we've gone from heavy, from trivial to heavy to inspirational to
We
I don't know
laughed, we
our
cried. It became a part of us. Rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend.
Team America
Also,
World Police. It's called Team
that's it.
America World Police. That was
World
it. Thank you.
Police.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right.
Uh,
We'll see you back here next week. Thanks, Charlie.
next week. All right. Thank you.